It's good to be back again for our regular press briefing. I just want to start off with a couple of items, and then my colleagues will chime in. But obviously, I'm sure there's lots of questions that will be asked. It's been a while since we've been with you, and I know there's a number of matters that are very topical over the last week or so. First, let me acknowledge the presence of Nurse Hazel Brown and obviously thank my colleague, Minister Mark Scotland, and the president of UCCI. Today, this afternoon, in fact, is going to be a very exciting day for the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Education, and UCCI, as we're going to be officially launching our nursing program. As you all will know, this has been talked about for some time now, but there's been a lot of work done in the background to ensure that we get to this stage. And I want to thank everyone who has been involved with the process. I want to thank all of the members of the Advisory Council for all of the work that they've put in. This journey has taken us quite some time to get here. I think we've been going at it now, Nurse Brown, about 4 years to get to this point. But we are confident that we have a program that is going to be high quality. It's going to meet the needs of our economy, the needs of our health sector. As most of you will know, health services is one of the aspects of all economies that's relatively immune to downturns. People don't stop getting sick, and people don't stop needing health care. And so this program, which is a Bachelor of Science in Nursing, is one that we believe is crucially important. It's not only important because of the current demands that we have within our sector at present, but it's also important because of the growth that we know we'll see in the sector in the coming years, not only with the Sherry project, but also a number of other exciting projects that the Minister of Health has briefed us on over the last year. Also, so why did we go down this road? The University College has had a long history of now trying to design programs to meet our specific needs within the economy, and this one does just that. We know that certainly one of the things that we wanted, and the Minister of Health very early on in his term spoke to the whole issue of nursing education and the need to progress. There had been a program that had been in place at the HSA, and this certainly is going to be one that goes well beyond that and ensures that we have the highest quality of education for the nursing sector. I'm not going to go any further. We have Nurse Brown here, and I know the Minister of Health will want to speak to the specifics as to what this means to the HSA. I also want to just give some very brief remarks in regards to government finances and what we're going to have to be doing over the next few weeks. Section 26 of the Public Management and Finance Law requires the production of a pre-election economic and financial update before the general election on 22nd of May. The purpose of the update is to provide an objective viewpoint on government finances so that hopefully during the campaign process the public is presented with accurate information rather than mere speculation. There's a number of important points that we wish to make about the update. Firstly, the update is produced by the civil servants and honorable ministers of government do not have any input on the results which will be stated in the update. Secondly, as of today's date, honorable ministers in cabinet have not seen the update, but have been provided with preliminary information about the results in the update. Thirdly, the update will be gazetted. Fourthly, the Public Management and Finance Law specifies that the update cannot be produced more than 42 days before the general election date, nor can it produced any less than 28 days before the general election date. This means at the very earliest, the update can be produced is on the 10th of April, which would be next week, and the latest date would be the 24th of April. In all likelihood, the update will be gazetted sometime between those two dates. The update provides a number of things. It provides economic forecasts, e.g., for example, forecasts on the GDP growth, inflation, and unemployment for the year 30th of June 2013 and for the following 2 years. Forecast financial statement information, for example, the surplus forecast figure and bank balances, as just two items of importance that will be produced. Again, for the year ended 30th of June and for the subsequent 2 years. And a statement specifying the date on which the update is prepared and an explanation as to how the forecast performance matches up or accords with the principles of responsible financial management. At present, it's worth repeating that the forecasts can and will be revised so that the figures that will appear in the update due between April the 10th and 24th can be different than the figures that will finally be produced as at the 30th of June. I think it's important to note that whilst this will be close to the end of the fiscal year, obviously there will be projections in there. None of those will be cast in stone. But being close to the end of the fiscal year, and traditionally not a lot of major activity happens in May or June in government finances, we would expect that these results are going to be fairly close, obviously, to actual performance. Given the timing and given the fact that we have not held cabinet for the last 2 weeks, and our next cabinet is due obviously next week, Tuesday, I would not want to go any further, but to say that we are going to press on to try and have these numbers gazetted as close to the 10th of April as humanly possible, and not closer to the 24th of April. Just also want to say that we had a very successful sitting of the House, and a number of very important pieces of legislation were passed during that last sitting. And I want to take this opportunity to thank the Speaker and all members of the House. All members of the House supported the government in ensuring that not only that we had quorum, but that we were able to deal with the important pieces of legislation that were passed into law during that last sitting. So at this stage, Minister Scotland, perhaps you might want to add some more to the nursing program.
Thank you, Deputy Premier, and just say add my greetings this morning after a few weeks of not having press briefing, but obviously good to see members of the press corps here this morning again, and also want to take this opportunity as well to welcome President Roy Bodden from University College of Cayman Islands and Nurse Hazel Brown, who are here this morning to add their comments or input or responses to any questions about the launch of the nursing program. Before I go into that, I want to mention some very good news as far as sports, in that we have had some very good Carifta results. A few weeks ago, I would have mentioned that the athletics team and the swimming teams had been selected and were finishing their preparations for Carifta. Well, Carifta was held over the Easter weekend, and we had some excellent results. Alex Pascal, as we all know, took the gold medal in the under-20 javelin in the Bahamas. As Minister for Sports, I would say I didn't expect anything less of Alex. He was the favorite to win. Alex was rated number 2 in the Caribbean last year, behind only the gold medal winner at the London Olympics in javelin. So he's very well advanced in his development now. He's at Florida Air Academy, finishing up there, and has already gained a scholarship to attend University of Missouri, an athletic scholarship, which will be supported in part by a government scholarship as well, to continue his education and his athletics career at University of Missouri, and be looking for significant, great things from Alex as he goes on, because he's a very, very talented young man, and obviously again an example of when you have that partnership between the coaches, his parents, government support through various ministries, that they can see, Alex developing in the future to being one of our future elite athletes. We also know a young lady, very young lady, only 14 years old, got the bronze in the javelin in under 17, so she's still very young, Denellis Thomas, and has 3 more years in that age group. So again, I expect to see even greater things come from her as she goes on in her athletic career. And of course, the swim team returns now. I think they're actually returning about 10 o'clock from Jamaica, and they garnered some, I think, 8 medals or somewhere thereabouts. Again, very, very good medal haul for a country of our size. We had a team of about 16 or 18, but the Swimming Association is doing exceptionally well with the new technical director, again, with significant support through government and Ministry of Sports, and they have an excellent development plan, which as they go on through the years, I'm sure we're going to see significant growth in the number of medals and awards that they win as they compete overseas as well. So we want to congratulate them on behalf of not only the ministry, but indeed the government and entire country, for the excellent achievements at the Carifta Games, both on the part of the athletics team and the swimming team, and welcome them back home as they return this week. I want to add my comments now to the comments from the Minister of Education about the nursing program. Certainly is a very proud day for myself as the Minister of Health, and indeed the Minister of Education and the government, as they launch today the Bachelor of Science nursing program, which will start in September at the University College. As the Minister said, Deputy Premier said, it's been in works now for almost 4 years. I can remember talking about this with him and Ministry staff and so on about starting this, and Nurse Hazel has been a dream of hers for a long time to have this program here as well. So the advisor council that was put together has done a significant amount of work to get to this point, working with consultants and so on to get to develop the curriculum, and then now to go out and market it and actually start the program. As we know, nursing is in high demand, not only here in the Cayman Islands, but indeed the Caribbean region and the world. Nurses, RNs, registered nurses are in short supply across the world, and in fact the Caribbean has been sort of the breeding ground for nurses in some of the other jurisdictions where they train. They're then highly sought after in the US and the UK and other countries. So being able to train our own nurses here, and in fact the cohort of nurses now, or the complement of nurses that we now have here in the Cayman Islands, is only 22% Caymanian. So there's significant opportunities there with the availability now of this program for nurses to be able to train right here, and then with the training, they'll also be eligible then to sit the nursing board exams in Jamaica to be registered nurses. And so this is an exciting program, an exciting advancement in terms of the educational opportunities available here in the Cayman Islands. As the Deputy Premier talked about, it's not only for the HSA, but we have the Dr. Shetty Hospital, which will be opening, and then other medical opportunities that are being developed here in the Cayman Islands. So this just shows the long-term plans that we have, that this government has for training and advancement of young people here to take advantage of the opportunities that are created. Nurses aren't trained in a day or a couple of days. So having a program like this certainly is a long-term plan to be able to offer opportunities for young Caymanians. As I said, there was a program here prior to this, the LPN program, which was a 2-year program, 2 or 3 year program, but again, that was limited in the scope for advancement after candidates successfully completed that program, because it didn't leave you with a Bachelor of Science or anything else that you could then take on for further training at a later stage. That program served well for many years, but we thought that it was better to move now to the BSc program, and as I said, we're very proud it's going to be launched and started in September. And certainly there's been a partnership between, as we said, the Ministry of Health, Education, and a great part, led in a significant way by the University College, and of course HSA as well, and Nurse Hazel Brown. Another area that I wanted to speak about when it comes to training and so on for medical personnel is that just last week we had a visit from the Caribbean Association of Medical Councils from Jamaica. It was on invitation from myself as the Minister of Health to come to Cayman to visit the HSA, to do an assessment and a review and assessment of the HSA in order to gain approval for being able to offer places for internships there for medical doctors. So that review has been done, and we're waiting on the final report to come. We're expecting it to be a positive report, but then in a few months' time, in short time, we'll be able to offer internship places there for doctors finishing their training at university and so on. Again, another great advancement in terms of opportunities for Caymanians in the medical field. And so we'll have some more information about that as time goes on in the press, but just wanted to mention that briefly as well. Before we move on as well, we want to invite the press and others out and the public out this evening to attend the actual launch of the nursing program. It'll be at University College at the Sir Vassal Johnson Hall. That will be at 5:30 this evening, so invite everyone to attend that exciting event as we have the official launch of the Bachelor of Science nursing program at University College of the Cayman Islands. I wanted to also speak very briefly to some questions that were raised at one of our last press briefings in relation to the human tissue and transplant bill. So I have a brief statement which I'll read in response to some of those questions that were raised at that last press briefing. So during the final meeting of the Legislative Assembly, which we concluded on the 25th of March, as we all know, the Human Tissue Transplant Bill 2013 was approved. Certainly this is a very significant piece of legislation as it regulates the collection and the use of human tissue here in the Cayman Islands and establishes a council which will be referred to as the Human Tissue Transplant Council, which will be responsible for monitoring the compliance with the provisions of the law. At the last press briefing, there was some questions regarding the bill, and at that time I didn't have the specifics, but now I'm able to report and respond to those questions. There was concern expressed about some of the provisions of the bill, about them allowing the sale and the purchase of human tissue, and that these provisions would effectively facilitate and foster a black market in human organs, whereby drug addicts and people that may be on dialysis and so on could sell both their kidney, or people not the persons on dialysis, but drug addicts and others might be able to sell their kidneys to other people. I want to assure the public that this is not the case. In fact, it's quite the opposite from that. The provisions of the Human Tissue Transplant Bill will make it an offense for someone to sell their tissue, and similarly it will be an offense for someone to purchase that tissue as well, or organ. Section 20 of the bill makes provisions that prohibit individuals from selling their organs and tissues. This will help protect against something like a black market, as was discussed before, or such as the idea that we would bring poor people here from another country and pay their way and so on, so that you can harvest their organ and then send them back home. Similarly, it would protect against local residents selling their organs for rewards such as funds to pay off a mortgage or to buy drugs or otherwise that had been suggested. And the bill does allow for a person who donates tissue to recover reasonable costs associated with the transportation, the removal, the evaluation, the storage, and the processing of tissue to, from, or at the tissue bank, and the distribution from the tissue bank of the tissue removed in accordance with the law. The tissue bank will be a place prescribed by the regulations under this law as a storage for tissue, and so there will be controls placed on that as well. Section 21 contains provisions that prohibit parties or persons or individuals from buying organs and tissues unless they are a licensed tissue bank. Section 21.2 makes provisions similar to those in Section 20 that will allow for tissue banks to pay for reasonable costs, but not for purchasing. But as I said, those costs are associated because if a person has to travel from a location to here or from here to another location, for instance, there are going to be costs associated with that. Transporting the organ, removing the organ, evaluating the person, medical and otherwise, storing the organ and processing of that organ donator from the tissue bank, and the distribution from that bank as well, once it's done in accordance with the law. So, I want to make it clear, like I said, the law does not allow for a donor to accept any benefits or rewards in kind for that donation other than reasonable costs. Another question that came up was regarding the provisions of Section 21.3, which makes provision for a permitted person to buy tissue from another person subject to conditions and restrictions that may be specified in the permit. One situation that could be dealt with under the provisions would be something like if a patient had a sibling overseas who had been identified as a suitable kidney donor without the provisions of Section 21.3. That recipient would not be able to offer to pay for the airfare for the person to come here, or for the cost of the procedure to harvest the kidney, or the cost of accommodations or so on for the person once they're recovering post-operation. So Section 21.2 deals with provisions for tissue banks, and 21.3 can be used for direct or targeted donations such as this. I want to reassure the public that the Human Tissue Transplant Bill will not create a black market in the Cayman Islands for human organ and tissue. It will simply provide a regulatory framework to govern and to oversee the importation and export, the consent procedures, and it prohibits commercial dealings in human tissue. The law also lays a foundation for the creation of an organ donor registry in the Cayman Islands, very important, which would allow us to participate in donor registry networks in the U.S. And this is a very important aspect of the law because prior to this, persons in need of transplants, in need of organs, found themselves way down on the list when they were, in long wait lists for years and years and years at times for organs. Being able now to create our own registry here, we now can participate in those international donor registry networks and automatically vault us up, place us higher in terms of priority when we're waiting on organ transplants. And I've already heard from persons who have experienced this, even with the passage of this bill just in the past week or so. Many of us have friends and loved ones who have benefited from being a recipient of donated tissue or organs, and many of us have friends and loved ones who are still waiting for that call to let them know that their donor has been found, that a matching donor has been found, and countless lives have been saved by organs, and I'm very excited about the prospect of the organ donor registry being established in the Cayman Islands. So I would like to encourage everyone to look at this new law and to understand that it provides a lot of hope for persons who are in a situation that need transplants on organs. I believe it's a vital and necessary first step in improving our access to much needed organs for our patients who are on waiting lists, as well as the future creation of a Cayman Islands donor registry ourselves that will give each and every one of us the opportunity to become organ donors ourselves and potentially save someone's lives after we've also passed on as well. So with those brief comments now, I'll pass on now to the Minister for Tourism.
Thank you, Minister Scotland. And I too want to express my greetings to the press and the members of the public who are watching this press briefing. As my colleagues have said, it's been a while since we've had the normal press briefings. So there's been a few initiatives that we've been working on in the ministry. The first one I can give an update on is there was a discussion, I think I've updated members of the press before, on the issue of local vessel licenses. And I can say that the ministry has requested drafting instructions to exempt commercial boat operators from the payment of the license fees. You'll remember there was a discussion on the new revenue measures as to whether it applied to just luxury boats or whether it was actually commercial vessels. And so after agreeing, looking back at the records, we've now given instructions, drafting instructions so that we can exempt the local operators, because the intention was never to create any more hardship or burden on the local operators. In terms of public transport application fees, there has been some discussion in the press concerning a determination in the law and interpretation of the law which referred to Caymanian operators. So basically what we had before was that we had individuals who owned transportation buses, mainly tour operators, and before operator was defined as being the owner of that operation, and those individuals then had other nationalities driving the the tour buses. A determination was made that operator meant anyone being in control of the bus, which had the unintended consequence of meaning that only Caymanians could drive. There was a request as to whether the government would change that. After consideration, the government, especially due to the unemployment situation, the government took a decision not to change that provision in the law, but to discuss with the operators their challenges and to see if we could find a way that would allow or encourage or incentivize the operators to actually hire many of the Caymanians who are qualified. Surprisingly, the operators said yes, they were more than willing to hire those operators, but the barrier to entry that had been determined, I guess, or set by the government made it pretty difficult for Caymanian operators to pass. So we ended up reaching an agreement. One of the barriers that was referenced was the licensing fee of $150. The government has given instructions that we will exempt Caymanians from having to pay the license fee, which will allow them to be licensed. So we're removing the $150 as an incentive for the operators to actually use Caymanians. We've also proposed that there would be an interim or a grace period which would allow the operators to be able to use the drivers for a period of time, somewhere around 30 days, that would allow them to get accustomed to and determine that the individuals were suitable for their operation. And we've also taken a look at the tourism-related tests. From the reports that were given to me by the operators, apparently there's a 95% failure rate on the tests. And obviously any test that is failing that number would indicate that there would be a problem. And so, again, the government is diligently working with the operators to ensure that they're able to continue providing the level of service that they're expected to provide, but that they're also incentivized to support and provide opportunities for as many Caymanians as possible. So that's an update on the public transport situation which has been in the press. In regards to another issue that we've talked about in terms of the aircraft purchase for Cayman Airways, the business case for the purchase of the 4 CAL 737 aircraft has been revised to the format provided by Mr. Nigel Herndon. Mr. Herndon was the procurement officer that has been sent down by the Foreign and Commonwealth Office to assist in the procurement. And that format is now currently being reviewed by the chair and CEO before being reviewed by PricewaterhouseCoopers. Once the PricewaterhouseCoopers review is complete, the business case will be sent to Mr. Homewood, who is the economic advisor for the FCO, to review. As you all know, we talked about the value for money objective of purchasing the aircraft instead of continuing with the lease and having to prepare the planes for the return at the end of the lease. And we've now, even though we have a difficult or austere financial situation, we have been in discussions, as we've notified before, with the Foreign and Commonwealth Office with an attempt to give some relief, I guess, to the stringent guidelines if we could show that the country will be better off with actually purchasing the aircrafts instead of continuing with the lease arrangement. So that was an update on that. The other area of responsibility of myself is that has been discussed is the airports, the Owen Roberts International Airport expansion. You would have known that we have a situation there where we have an acting chief executive officer of the Cayman Islands Airports Authority. And in communication with him, he has stated that the scope of the current business case for the Owen Roberts International Airport expansion does not satisfy the requirements of the FCO. So in keeping with the directive whereby a qualified accounting firm either prepare the business case or review the same, the acting CEO has made a recommendation to that effect, and he's waiting instruction from the CIA Board of Directors. So you would remember there was a lot of discussion. There was a proposal that has been ongoing for slightly over a year, which was proposing to make a business case and to make a case that could satisfy the Central Tenders Committee that there was a need for a single source provider. The new CEO has determined, the Central Tenders Committee was not satisfied, and they determined that it had to be, it had to go to competitive tender instead of single source. upon taking over responsibility for the ministry, I attempted to get the business case that was there converted that it could be used by central tender to do the competitive tendering process. And now the CEO has determined that it's not able, the current business case that was being used is not able, and that we're going to have to go through and get a business case prepared by an independent accounting firm, a qualified independent accounting firm. And so that's where that process is on the airport. In terms to a very topical issue, the Port Authority Cayman Islands cruise berthing facility, as has been outlined in terms of the best practice and international best practice and accepted procurement methods that the government has committed to moving forward with in terms of being able to deliver a berthing facility. I'm pleased to announce that the strategic outline case, which was an initial requirement of that, has been finalized and it's been sent to the Public Sector Investment Committee for review as per Regulation 4 to 5 of the financial regulations. So based on the requirements, our laws in terms of procurement, the requirement is that the strategic outline case should be sent to the Public Sector Investment Committee. And so that's what we've done. We've made a commitment to follow the established procurement practices, the laws that govern procurement in our islands. And so we've also sent the strategic outline case to the Deputy Governor and Mr. Nigel Herndon again for their comments. And once we've received the review of the strategic outline case from the Public Sector Investment Committee, the Chief Officer who is leading the process will submit a paper for Cabinet consideration of the strategic outline case. And then the strategic outline case will form part of the requests for proposals for the business case. So I've briefly tried to give an update on the 6 most topical areas of my ministry, and hopefully have been able to answer some concerns or questions that may have been raised in the public in regards to those. And I look forward to questions after the conclusion of the comments by my colleagues.
Thank you. Minister Scott, Minister Seymour, you had some comments.
Thank you, and again, thank the press for being here today. Also our guests, Nurse Hazel and President Borden, for joining us here today. And also have some topical issues that that I have some messages on in regards to Siemens ex gratia grant, and also the affordable housing initiative that we've had some comments going around viral, I guess, on Facebook and other media vehicles. So I'll address those this morning. And upon the completion of a recent internal audit of the Siemens ex gratia grant, the Ministry of Community Affairs introduced the Siemens continuation certificates in February of this year to ensure accurate and complete records are being maintained. As a result, 828 continuation certificates were issued to the grant recipients of this program to update the required information. All certificates, along with affidavits of income forms, were to be returned to the ministry by the 28th of February 2013. To date, approximately only 70% of those certificates have been returned, which is a little troubling. If the forms are not returned by 7th of April 2013, the benefit will be suspended for the month of May 2013 for those persons who did not comply with the request. The purpose of these certificates is to ensure that the ministry's records concerning grant recipients are accurate and complies with the approved criteria. It is important to note continuation certificates will be issued each year to confirm the recipient meets the approved criteria. They will be asked to return the continuation certificates to the ministry by a specific deadline. However, recipients are encouraged to contact the ministry whenever a change in their personal details occur. For more information, persons may contact the ministry at 244-2424. We'd like to thank participating seamen in advance for helping us to ensure the kind of accurate records management that is so vital to government's accountability. Also, the status of the Affordable Housing Initiative. Following the legal opinion that was issued in April 2011, the National Housing Development Trust was legally advised to allocate some of the new houses to those persons who had mortgage agreements under the Affordable Housing Initiative. A report by a local engineer also outlined that many of the old houses were not safe and presented potential liabilities to the NHDT and central government. The NHDT could only commit to building 94 new houses based on the funds that were made available to the trust. Hence, the NHDT board was responsible for allocating homes to those persons who remain current with their payments under the mortgage agreement and facilitate housing opportunities to new applicants. The board also noted that there were approximately 6 clients that earned over $3,000 in income. Given this, the board issued a notice to terminate the old AHI agreement for those individuals as they earn sufficient income and no longer need to depend on government housing. To date, the NHDT has only given notice to terminate to 3 clients who have been in breach of the initial affordable housing agreement, as either they are employed but have not maintained their monthly commitments for a substantial period, or have vacated their houses and made arrangements to rent their homes to others without notifying the NHDT. The nature of this initiative was not designed to be a profit-based program. In addition, the board notes that there are elderly individuals who are indigent and simply cannot afford to maintain their commitment. There are other cases whereby clients have been unemployed for a substantial period and do not have the means to make the monthly payments. Such individuals are being subsidized by the Department of Children and Family Services. The NHD has issued no termination notices to individuals that are being assisted by the Department of Children and Family Services, noting that the NHDT has historically accommodated a mixture of clients with various social and economic issues and is currently looking at viable solutions to address this situation. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Seymour. And just before moving on, I think the president of UCCI and Nurse Brown just wanted to add a few very brief comments in regards to the nursing program that we're going to unveil this evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Deputy Premier and Minister for Education. I just wanted to say that the launch of this nursing program marks a milestone in education and especially vocational training in the Cayman Islands. And it is with great pride that I speak on behalf of the university to say how much we appreciate the support received from our partners, the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, and the HSA. We at the University College see this as an ideal opportunity for our students because we have the philosophy that we want to inculcate in our students a sense of building a community, giving something back to the society. And I take this opportunity to say that it is a policy proposal coming from the administrative and academic committee, and which will be going to the board shortly, that beginning in September of 2013 for the new academic year, the proposal is that our students, in addition to completing their academic requirements, will have to complete a certain number of hours of community service in order to receive their degree, making it possible for a student to have completed their academic requirements but still not be awarded the degree because they have not completed that community service portion of their education. So we see the School of Nursing dovetailing ideally into that new philosophy which the university is embarking upon to build a sense of community spirit in our graduates. Mention has been made of the popularity of nursing and the need for trained nurses, not only in the Cayman Islands, but in the region and throughout the world. Indeed, our first objective, of course, is to provide nurses for the Caymanian society. But we understand that we can do that, and what happens after that, we would like our program to be sustainable. So it is our ambition to market the program beyond the shores of the Cayman Islands. And we've already begun to receive requests from other jurisdictions which we hope to cultivate and to develop appropriate relationships. We are excited about this. Our nurses will be qualified and they will be licensed to practice in the region and beyond. It is a credible program with proper accreditation. Our standards are high, so we are excited about the program. And from the feasibility surveys which we have conducted, we have all indications that it will be a successful program.
Thank you very much, Deputy Premier. The four-year bachelor's degree program in nursing is designed to prepare nurses as generalists with the required knowledge, skills, and attitudes to practice at the entry level within the legal and ethical frameworks and to practice safely. The program provides a foundation in the sciences and liberal arts for a professional career in a dynamic and diverse society, as well as for entry into advanced and specialist services. It fosters critical thinking, integrated nursing knowledge, skills, and professional attitudes that are necessary for assisting individuals and groups to achieve and maintain optimum health. Upon completion of this program, the graduate will be prepared to provide comprehensive care at primary, secondary, and tertiary institutions within both hospital and community settings. The entry requirements, there are two tracks for entry. One is the post-secondary education entry, which is a minimum of 5 CXC, IGCSE, GCSE equivalent, including mathematics, English, and biology. And for the benefit of those persons who are coming out of our licensed practical nurse program, which started in the early 70s, we have a mature student clause, which allows the licensed practical nurse trained in the Cayman Islands with 5 years relevant experience and a GCE pass or CXE pass in mathematics to access the training as well. Our applicants must be a minimum age of 17 years, and that is because at completion they must be old enough to legally carry the keys to manage controlled drugs. And applicants will have to submit a personal statement and undergo an interview. We are all very, very excited about the launch of this program, and we expect to have a very, very successful future with it.
Okay, thank you very much. At this time, we open up to any questions.
Oh, sorry. On the budget, Deputy Premier Anglin, just a couple of things, if you could go into this. The surplus projected at the beginning of the year, if memory serves, was something like $87 million. representations that we've had recently from people in the civil services that it's not going to get there. Are you all looking at, to the extent you can discuss it now, are you all looking at any sort of surplus now with the government budget? Are you hopeful that there will be a operating surplus by the time we get to June 30th?
I have all confidence that we're going to have a healthy operating surplus. As I said in my comments, I would rather wait for us to formally meet next Tuesday, and at next week's briefing, hopefully we'll be in a position to discuss the details. But certainly, there is nothing in the projections that we've seen, and obviously with the revenue measures that we've put in place and controlling expenses, we are more than 100% confident that we're going to have a healthy surplus.
And then also the $30 million that the Premier was referencing a while ago about the environmental fund, is that still, have you all gotten any response from the UK on that about whether that can be used, or are you going to need to use it?
No. In terms of our funds and how our funds are managed, I think certainly the incoming government after the May general elections need to take a strategic look and come up with a policy position. And I think that is certainly something that all of us are in agreement with. We don't believe that there should be any one single fund that just continues to grow and CIG doesn't utilize those funds or doesn't have a need to. And so there is thought processes around the establishment of a number of other funds that perhaps would be a good way to manage the affairs of the country.
Okay, but during this budget year, you're not asking for any money from the Environmental
No.
Protection Fund? Okay.
No.
I'll be back.
I have a number of questions, so perhaps I'll ask one and let you answer. They're on various topics. So my first question is, I've heard talk of another economic zone being created, this one focusing on reinsurance. And I understand that there's been some movement on this from government side. I'm wondering if there's been any RFP put out. Has that process started? Is there anything you can tell us about this economic zone that there's talk about?
Sure. Tommy, government has received 2 unsolicited proposals for the establishment of a zone that would focus on reinsurance, the industry of reinsurance. Thus far, what a lot of people in the industry itself are saying to us is that given the specific carve-outs that we've already created, that is 10-year permits allowing executives coming from reinsurance companies to also bring with them some of their very close support staff. We believe that we already have a very good package on offer. The idea of the zone, from everything we've heard thus far, is more aligned with a marketing tool, as it were, that pulls everything together. And so some of the practitioners have said to government that they believe that anyone that's looking to take advantage of that needs to put their own package together and go market it versus trying to create a zone for that specific industry. So there is that sort of dynamic that's happening right now in terms of the feelings that's out there about whether or not there should be a specific zone for reinsurance.
So there's been no award or no contract awarded or anything like that?
No.
Nothing like that has happened?
But Tom, if we just pick up on the point that my colleague was making in terms of, it's important to note that the government has concentrated and made specific legislative changes. I think my colleague just referred to one of those being the 10-year permit that has come from industry and has said Cayman is primed to take some of that reinsurance business, and we need to make some changes. And the government has continued to make those changes. What I think you're referring to is now some other interested parties, as my colleague mentioned, 2 unsolicited proposals, which comes along and says, I want government to go further than they have gone. Instead of just the general provisions, we would like government to give us a bit more that we can actually package and market and go out and make, because they don't think that we've gotten all the success that the Cayman Islands could have gotten. All right, so that's where I guess your suggestion or question is coming from, that there has been 2, but I wanted to make mention of the fact that government has, made a specific push to try to encourage that business based on recommendation of those individuals in the industry. And now there's a recommendation that we should make a more concerted effort and maybe give even more incentive to allow, because one of the things that have been said is that in general the Cayman Islands has done that, but no one actually has the incentive to actually put money up to go out and market the Cayman Islands specifically in this area of potential business.
What I was interested in finding out is if we were going to see another CEC, another, Cayman Economic City. So I think that has been answered. I have some questions from Mr. Scotland in his capacity as sports minister, asking these on behalf of my colleague. He's asking about Alex Pascal, about the $40,000 that was supposedly given to him. His dad says that's not true. Where has the money come from and for how long? And is there documentation to prove it? And sticking along those lines, he's also asking about Coach Gilly Seymour. He's been banned from SIFA for a year for his behavior, but is he still paid by government as a community coach? Or he is still paid by government as a community coach. Is that something that you think is okay? So about Alex Pascal.
Those two questions?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, Alex's father, Richard, is absolutely correct. Nobody's given, at least not the government, has given Alex $40,000. Alex was awarded, was provided support to attend Florida Air Academy. That support came from the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Sports, and through the Young Nation Building Fund. As I said, in looking at Alex's accomplishments, achievements in his young career already, Alex was rated number 2 in the Caribbean in the javelin throw for his age. As I said, the only person rated higher in the Caribbean, the president of javelin, is the javelin thrower from Trinidad, who's also the Olympic gold medal winner. So we looked at his accomplishments, the development plan that was put together along with his father, his coaches, including the technical director from here, coaches from Cuba that have evaluated Alex Pascal, as well as working with the head track and field coach from University of Missouri, was here in December. That was facilitated through one of our former premier elite athletes, Kareem Street Thompson, who's now an assistant coach at that school. And so with evaluations from all those coaches and with his academic success as well, Alex was an honor student from Clifton Hunter High School, started some studies at University College as well. But since that time, we looked at assessed all of his academics, athletic potential and so on, the development plan he had in place, and the government awarded that support to Alex through the school he's attending, which is Florida Air Academy, which is finishing his high school now at that academy, and focusing heavily on academics and preparation for college. As I said, he's already gained a scholarship at University of Missouri, a partial scholarship, which will be also supported by government. So no individual support has gone to Alex in the form of the $40,000 has been referred to. It's been supported him in his education, in preparation for his collegiate career, which is an athletic career. I mentioned earlier that Alex has the potential to be one of our next elite athletes. Certainly Olympics and World Championships are in his future, and government is doing our part to support him, and we'll continue to do our part to support athletes like Alex. Alex isn't the only one. You have a number of others. Obviously, the only limitation to government support for some of these athletes is a constraint on funding. There are a number of other athletes that certainly would qualify as well, but and certainly in the future we would hope that more funds could be allocated in that area, because we do have tremendous potential here in terms of our young athletes.
And Coach Gilly?
Coach Gilly, yes, Coach Gilly is still an employee of the sports department as a community coach. I believe in his capacity as a coach of one of the local football clubs. He has been suspended from the Football Association. That certainly doesn't have any bearing on his role as a community coach. But if there are issues related to that, certainly that would be dealt with through the Department of Sports and the head of that department, Mr. Colin Anglin.
All right. Now to the upcoming elections. A couple of questions there. The first one surrounding what was going to be, or what may still be, one of your running mates in your team, your group called People's National Alliance. Richard Christian, his name has been taken off of the ballot paper, according to the elections office. a comment from you about that. And my second question along those lines, the Pirates Week director, Bernie Bush, is he still on contract, or is he on a leave of absence? Can there be clarification from government as to what's happening with his position?
Who wants to take it? I guess I can take it since there's been some question or suggestion of controversy. So if I just answer the first question in regards to Richard, obviously Mr. Christian was announced as a member of our team, and we were looking forward to the contribution that Mr. Christian can make. Obviously, we respect the law. We respect the decisions of the elections office. The Cayman Islands has had a very highly regarded and respected elections, and we encourage and support continuing that way, and wouldn't want to do anything that brings it into question. And so, while respecting the decision that has been made, we are like you asked, we're as expected, disappointed in Mr. Christian not being allowed. But as we know, in regards to the law, if we feel that it's an unreasonable or unfair decision, there are opportunities to be able to appeal that through the respective challenges, and Mr. Christian will decide as to whether he thinks that's a way that he should go. In regards to the second question, in regards to an area under my responsibility, which is namely Mr. Bush, I can say very clearly that apparently there was some miscommunication in the newspaper. I have, as minister with responsibility, I can say that Mr. Bush has resigned his position, so he's not on any sabbatical or any leave of absence. The minutes of the meeting that I have seen shows that there was some sort of suggestion as to that. When it was determined that Mr. Bush was going to actually be requesting that period of time off to actually contest the upcoming elections, the management and staff of the Tourism Attraction Board made it very clear that that was not allowed for in the law. And they received his resignation letter, which made it clear that he was resigning the position. So he has resigned the position. There was a question as to the period of notice that was given in Mr. Bush's resignation letter. His contract called for a 3-month resignation. He asked the board to consider, even though it was less than the 3 months that was required, that they would allow him to resign. And I'm not sure what decision the board has made in that, but I'm in receipt as a minister with responsibility of the resignation letter from Mr. Bush in his capacity in regards to the Pirates Week.
So, in terms of the acceptance of that resignation, that you're saying that is not clear as to whether that has happened.
Maybe Tammy, I mean, if it is going to be an issue that we want to get more clarity on, I could request that my chief officer come down. Obviously, as you can imagine, when it comes down to administrative authority, I don't have administrative responsibility. This is actually the Tourism Advisory Board, the TAB. Because it was in the press and because there were concerns, I've been copied in communication so that I would be informed as the minister. We want to make it clear, first of all, from the potential area of conflict. He is a candidate in the district of West Bay. In this particular case, he's actually my cousin as well. So if you have further questions, maybe it's important or prudent for us to get the chief officer to come down who could answer those questions. I can say that what I've seen, and maybe reading this might assist. And this is the resignation letter from Mr. Bernard Bush addressed to Mr. Gilbert Conley. It says, "Hello, sir. I hereby tender my resignation as of March the 15th, 2013. I am aware that the requirement of my contract is to give 3 months notice. However, since my contract expires 2 weeks after my resignation date, I am humbly requesting that you please consider waiving this requirement. I do hope that you will consider my request favorably and that the final check will include vacation and anything else that may be possible in view of my hard and tireless work in turning Pirates Week around. God bless you, the board, and the TAB family." It's stamped as being received on the 5th of March, 2013, by the Managing Director, Mr. Gilbert Conley. Like I said, this is what has been forwarded to me and provided. I'm not sure if that gives enough clarity, but if you desire more, I'm more than happy to request that the person who has administrative responsibility in the ministry would come down and provide more clarity if necessary.
I suppose all we really need to know is whether it's been accepted. So I don't know if by way of message they could let
Sure.
you know.
I'll question.
Thank you.
Mr. Glidden, I'll stick with you, sir, since you were just speaking. We've been hearing some things about Cayman Airways, and since you spoke about the sale of the, or the possible purchase of the planes, did with the Philippine Airlines deal that was discussed with the previous government that was in power, where are we standing on that? I've heard money had transferred with regards to them giving Cayman Airways some money. Did that actually occur? And also, I'm also hearing that Cayman Airways hasn't had the bottom line that was previously spoken to about by the previous government as well.
Jay, I can say to you that as a member of the former caucus and now as a minister with responsibility, I have no indication that any money was given in regards to the proposed agreement with PAL. What we were informed, and I can, now that the question has come, I can confirm this for you, but our understanding of the agreement was that there was a potential for a purchase of some shares in the Cayman Airways company that would have allowed it to have some cash allocated, right, through the purchase of those shares, which was then proposed to, amongst other things, be used for the purchase the purchase of the aircrafts that are currently leased. As far as we've been informed, that deal is no longer active in terms of a Cayman Airways board perspective, and that no cash, so there's no obligation, as far as we know, in regards to cash. I think, Jay, in regards to the whole concern, the ongoing concern of Cayman Airways, it's important for us to note that we've used a different method of accounting in regards to Cayman Airways as well in regards to government. So before, we were used to hearing about subsidies that were given to the airline or subsidies that were given to other entities, government and non-government organizations. And so how it worked before, if Cayman Airways came along, we would give a subsidy to Cayman Airways of $15 million, and we would see that as a loss, and we would say that Cayman Airways had lost $15 million. In 2009, I think, the Cayman Airways board approached government and said, it's not fair for us to continue referring to a subsidy or continue referring to it as a loss of Cayman Airways when yourselves as a shareholder have been directing us to take on operational aspects, for example, new routes that we know are going to lose money, but it's being used as a partner in moving tourism forward. And so Cayman Airways came to the table, the government accepted a proposal that would call for a purchase of outputs or services by Cayman Airways. So if, for example, we decide that for tourism purpose we want to send or open a new route into Dallas, which by the way we did, is doing quite well, Cayman Airways will come along and say, we're projecting to lose $2 million in that route, Cayman Islands government. You can direct us to do that if you want, but we don't want at the end of the day to be seen as a $2 million loss to Cayman Airways. So what we're going to do is we're going to invoice you for $2 million, and you're going to pay us that $2 million because it benefits you and you've made a policy decision to use Cayman Airways in that way, right? So what you're going to have is you're going to have invoices to the Cayman Islands government for the amount that would have been the subsidy before. And instead of it being seen as a subsidy, you're going to see it as a purchase agreement from the Cayman Islands government for the services provided by Cayman Airways. And depending on my accounting friend here and the practice and the treatment that is associated with that, you will then get it to a point where you say, instead of a subsidy, you now can break even, for example, or you can make a profit because you're actually getting paid for the services you provide, right? And so based on that model, obviously you would expect that the amount in terms of a subsidy, or depending on how you account for that, whether it's break even or not, would change significantly to what was done before. But I think it's an accepted norm that if the Cayman Islands government makes decisions that are not necessarily in line with what Cayman Airways would be doing in terms of just running the company, but they're now being used for a tourism tool, that it's only fair that the Cayman Islands government should take responsibility for that associated cost and not make the airline treat that as if it's a loss on operations when they're trying to run the business as profitable as they could be seen as running. I'm not sure if that answers the question, but hopefully.
Thank you. It really does. Thank you very much, sir. Minister Scotland, a few comments if you have on World Health Day tomorrow.
Well, the annual day recognizing World Health, and obviously from the minister's perspective, want to encourage people to think on, all the time, but particularly on tomorrow, about being proactive about their own health care, taking responsibility for their own health, living healthy lifestyles, active healthy lifestyles, eating healthy, and so on. Obviously, because the impact of that on your own health is very, very positive, and in the long term, also reduces healthcare costs and so on across the country, entire country.
With the new organ transplant law now in effect, does that satisfy all of our legislative agreements that we had with the Shetty Hospital with regards to that, or is there still more laws that need to be passed to satisfy the memorandum of understanding that was signed way back when to get this started?
Yeah, I mean, first let me say, Jay, that we didn't pass organ legislation solely for because of the obligation and agreement with Dr. Shetty. All the legislation has been passed, indeed, to meet our obligations there, have proven to be beneficial for the country in general. The tort reform, for instance, was one of the first pieces of legislation that's beneficial in general to our health practice industry, as well as the other pieces that have been passed as well. But so with this in place now, we just have the human organ tissue transplant legislation in place now. We only now have to finish the regulations as far as the health practice law, as far as registration of practitioners, and as I said, we're looking at that from, again, not just the perspective of the Dr. Shetty project, but also from the perspective of where we can look at practitioners coming from other jurisdictions. Right now, we limit practitioners to only seven jurisdictions across the world, and certainly, I think in doing so, we're limiting healthcare possibilities that people here could have. So the regulations that are left to be completed now will open those possibilities so that we can look at nurses, for instance. I know and Nurse Hazel could talk about that as well. The nurses from Chile, for instance, Chile has excellent nurse training opportunities, and so right now at this time we're not able to look at, if it was a nurse, for instance, that wanted to apply to be registered here, we couldn't do that. So what we're doing with the regulations is opening it up to be able to at least consider practitioners from jurisdictions other than the 7 currently in the law.
And that doesn't impede the building of the Shetty Hospital, the first phase, or any of that whatsoever? No.
I mean, I think there have been some updates coming to the press. I've seen a few of them. That the project, I think, is progressing extremely well. What I'm very pleased about, as all of us are, to see that it's providing some employment opportunities at present, and note that they have quite a significant number. So I think that the last report I saw, over 85% of the persons working on that site are Caymanians. So that's obviously one of the reasons why we support this project, because of the opportunities it provides at the construction phase, but we're also looking to the operational phase for future opportunities as well.
Thank you, sir. And just my final question before I pass the baton, Minister Anglin, the financial report that will be handed out here in the next few days. Actually, I have one more after this. Sorry. How do we make sure that the same war of words between the former government at the last election and the civil service, or the confusion and the final balance sheets type of thing, doesn't occur at this particular election time as well? I'm sure you recall.
Sure, that's a very fair question, Jay. And trying to ensure anything of that nature is very difficult, Jay. But we need to try. You're quite right. We do the public a disservice. We actually do the process and our law a disservice, because what this is designed to do is to actually have meaningful debate around where public finances stand, and to have some clarity, and obviously any incoming administration would want to be able to rely on that information and ensure that when they take office, that what was in the pre-election report is what's facing them. As again, absent something major happening in those last few days, and that ordinarily wouldn't happen, certainly not for May or June in a normal year. what I can say is that the team is being very conservative in their approach, and trying to ensure that they've dotted every I, crossed every T, and drilled down into all of the projections coming through from ministries, looking at those assumptions, and obviously looking critically at the government-owned companies, because their results obviously impact the bottom line as well.
And my final question is, March 8th was the day that we had thought we'd see the 4 Cayman Alliance value for money audit. Where are we now?
Well, we are certainly continuing to press forward, and let me just clarify one thing, that and obviously there's one optic that we will not be able to share. I mean, the people will continue to say, well, you don't want to show it because it's not showing value for money, and we've done amendments. But the fact of the matter is, given the passage of time and what has happened, and the fact that we tried to break apart a very large development agreement, because that's what it was. This was a development agreement with the country's largest developer to give them not only certainty, but also give certainty to the economic growth that would come to the country for years to come. This is a project whose tail is going to last somewhere between 15 and 30 years. Trying to project out that far and negotiate out that far is fraught with difficulties in splitting out the NRA element just to deal with roads, etc. What obviously happened during that process is that in the first instance, some of the elements that were left in the mean agreement, we said, you know what, we really need to shift it. And obviously once we got to the point where we knew the mean agreement wasn't going to move forward, then we had to really, well, certainly not move forward before these general elections. We wanted to ensure that we put in the NRA agreement items that we felt were critically important, but not only critically important, but tied to that element, which was realignment of West Bay Road, public beaches, and public spaces. And of course, the road upgrade into the district of West Bay. We're pretty close to wrapping that up. I can also say that PricewaterhouseCoopers, who's the independent firm that's preparing the report, are working diligently, and certainly they, as I understand it, are a few weeks off being able to finalize now their report and looking at all the amendments that have come forward.
So maybe sometime in May?
I hope not. No, April.
A few weeks.
April. It should be in April.
Good morning.
Good morning, Wendy.
I have two questions. One is related to the 4 Cayman Alliance, actually, which is there any significant movement on the situation regarding the landfill? Are they still continuing to do work in Midland Acres? Have those talks stopped? Can you give us any update at all on that element of the deal and where that's likely to go before the election? And secondly, given the situation over the Czech agreement that we've now seen, that you all say that you were not privy to, since you've taken over cabinet collectively as the interim government, have you discovered any other things hiding in the ministerial cabinet, as it were, literally, that perhaps the people should know about before the election?
Let me address the first one, Wendy, and first say that there was never any work, there's never been any work being carried out in Midland Acres to begin with relation to the proposed project. The work that you may be referring to was work that was being carried out to facilitate the environmental impact assessment at the proposed site, which is not in Midland Acres itself. Just to be clear, it's in a site which is just some ways to the east of Midland Acres. So there was some preliminary work, like temporary tracks and so on, going in there so that they could facilitate the works for carrying out the environmental impact assessment. As I understand it, that those works, the environmental impact assessment itself is ongoing, although there wouldn't be very much evidence of any activity happening at present, because most of that work is monitoring, wells and boreholes and that sort of thing would be happening. So there's no physical activity being carried on at that site, as far as I'm aware at this time. And as far as the government's position at this point is that it's quite obvious that there will not be any agreement in terms of the Four Cayman Alliance main agreement as far as the Georgetown landfill and proposed waste management facility. That decision certainly will be on how the entire waste management solution for the country will be dealt with in the future. Will be a decision for the government who comes in after me. Certainly, we wouldn't be in any position at this time to sign any agreement of that magnitude anyway, even if it was something that would be ready to go. So what I can say, Wendy, is that as far as from my perspective, is that we were part of putting a proposal or a proposal for the country to consider, because we've always talked about the cost of the solution of doing it in Georgetown. I personally have never said that it could not be done there. It's just a matter of the cost associated with it. We know that the $100 million cost that was identified in the GBB report, $100 million capital costs and $25 million per year of operational costs to run a facility to deal with waste to energy and dealing with the waste management solution at the current site in Georgetown. If the next government is able to find $100 million and fix it in Georgetown, that'll be a good solution to be done right there. Certainly, within the time that's left now between election, there's no further discussions to be had or anything further to happen with that proposal for the waste management facility at Bordentown. It's certainly, as I said earlier, a decision to be made by the next government as to how they deal with that problem. And I can say that I think it's one of the most serious problems facing the country, environmental and otherwise. The solution to long-term solution to waste management in the country. So that'll be a problem for the next government, and I hope that they will deal with it aggressively and very quickly, because like I said, it's a serious situation. As far as the check deal and finding any other hidden or other ones, as you said, certainly you might have to ask that to the two members who always seem to find those, because as far as it's them that identify those hidden away things, not us. So
I just want to add to that. I've seen some information on your site suggesting that I was one of the persons that was still encouraging the waste management facility in Bordentown. I guess they threw in my colleague name also as the only persons left, and everybody has recused themselves from having any direct involvement in the waste management facility. First, I want to note that as a member for the Bordentown district, no one never came to me as a representative for Bordentown and asked me if I was okay with a waste management facility going in Bordentown. I want to make that clear. So I didn't sacrifice Bordentown as the area for waste management facility. And I want to make that clear. That's from Dwayne Stanley Seymour. That I was a part of a group who made a decision that we could solve the waste management problem where it was at the current site. And then the former premier made an announcement, unbeknownst to me and my colleagues, that the waste management facility was going in Bordentown, throwing us under the bus. And I want to make it clear that I wasn't happy at that time that Bordentown was the chosen site without even coming to us as representative first, so that we could go to our representatives or the citizens of Bordentown and talk to them first about this new development. So there was a situation there that we had to deal with. I mean, we could get into this deeper and why nothing was said during the time. There were promises that it wouldn't be a dump, that it would be a recycling recycling components and other components, compacting and otherwise, that would be a part of this this waste management facility. It wouldn't be nothing of the norm, and that the DOE and the environmental groups Cayman would get together and ensure that it was done properly. I was somewhat encouraged that we could move along with a process like that. Was not happy and did not decide at any point in my career that a waste management facility should be in Bordentown. As far as I'm concerned, that's off the table. There's nothing that is being even discussed. I haven't heard seen any discussion in over a year about a facility in Bordentown. There's nothing that I support. It wasn't my decision to bring it there, and I just want to let the public understand that I am not one of the supporters of a waste management facility going in Bordentown. So I just want to make that clear. And in terms of the check deal, I wasn't a part of cabinet at the time, but as a caucus member, we've asked numerous amount of questions about the check deal as we were concerned. We always got the response of that they were doing business studies, and that when everything was available, they would unveil it to us. So not even us as a caucus knew anything about what was in the check deal.
If I can just answer, add a little bit, because when I think that your question is a very pertinent one, very all-encompassing and very difficult to answer, but we want to make sure that from an expectation standpoint, I think from the first, I think it's fair to say that we knew there were negotiations and discussions ongoing with China Harbor. I think the country knew. I think the former premier was very clear that he supported that. They were moving forward. I think the former negotiator from the political side, being Mr. Ilya Solomon. In answering your question as to whether there was any surprises, I think the surprise was there was actually an agreement, a signed agreement, and there's some question as to the binding nature of that agreement. So, trying to fairly answer your question, to ask if there's any other surprises, I can say that we don't know of any of those because no one has come. But again, this was something that my ministry received on Thursday of last week, and the initial instructions from myself and the chief officer was, let's send this over to the legal department so we can get the chief legal advisor to the government of the Cayman Islands, namely the Attorney General, to look to see what liability, if any, would be incurred by the government based on the agreement. So we were able to get the document. It came from the Port Authority. The actual managing director of the Port Authority sent it to my chief officer, and my chief officer then sent it on to the legal department. Right. So again, we knew that there was information. I've sat here before you all and said we knew. We don't know what we've actually paid for. We don't know what we've gotten. It's not within the ministry. We're trying to ascertain what commitments or obligations were existing in place before we entered into other negotiations. And after requesting that information for quite a few months, the Port Authority was able to actually get a copy of the agreement from their lawyers, and that agreement was then sent over to the ministry. I would love to be able to say to you that there's no more surprises there, but based on that, I can't. I can't say to you that I, you know. So hopefully, we now understand where that, when government first got access to the information, as to how that information became public, that's a different discussion. But in terms of us getting surprised, I can say to you that while we knew there were some discussions, we knew that there was a proposal. You will remember us talking about apparently commitments and plans to start the spots landing. We knew that there were plans in place. But again, as to knowledge or approval, my other colleagues who were in cabinet, I think have answered the question that they had no knowledge that an actual agreement had been signed. I can say that from a caucus standpoint, we had no knowledge that an agreement had been signed either. But I don't think it would be fair to say that we didn't know that they were in discussions. We just didn't know the level of discussions that existed.
I know that time is of the essence and we must be winding down, but I have to come back to the two Bordentown representatives. Mr. Seymour, you know, we talk about collective responsibility and all of that, and the understanding was that the FCIA agreement, including the waste management facility in Bordentown was one that was supported by all members, including yourself and Mr. Scotland. To hear you say now that this is something you do not support, I personally am a bit surprised. So are you saying that in all that time you did not support the waste management facility in Bordentown?
I'm sure you understood what I said. I let it up in a fashion that everybody could understand where I was coming from, where that came from, the surprise element of everything in terms of how it came about. I was never in support of the way that that came about.
And you made it clear.
And I made it clear that after what had been done, we had been thrown under the bus. I did my best to ensure that Bordentown wasn't getting a dump.
Okay, and I have to ask, why did you not come out publicly about this stance?
I'm sure
before
that
now?
a lot of people have squabbles in their family and they don't come out in public to say it on the radio. Yeah.
I don't know if Mr. Scotland
No,
wants
let
to
me
speak
let me
to
just
that.
make it clear, Tommy. I said that I didn't go into the way in which the project came about at that time. What I said was that the previous governments have been trying to find a solution for this problem from the time I was working with the civil service myself. There's been many studies and investigations and feasibility studies and so on carried out as to how to identify a solution to the long-term waste management of our solid waste management for the Cayman Islands. During that time, that pile of garbage, Mount Trashmore as it was called, has grown from 15 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet to now it's 80 feet tall. I can recall the most recent study that was done by the previous government by a company called GBB, which came back with a study that said that you can, and that study focused on addressing the problem at the Georgetown dump using waste to energy. The results of that study showed that it would cost $100 million to build a facility there, and it said somewhere in the region of $18 to $25 million on an annual basis. It even went as far as to identify the revenue streams that government should either implement or increase to pay the operational cost of running that facility. This government came in. There was an RFP that was done for that, which would have been the next logical step after the study was carried out by the previous government. The RFP that was carried out for that same thing, and it talked about identifying a solution. I believe the RFP identified that site as the priority location or the main location where it should be considered. Other proposals were presented. I believe that the proposal which we considered now, the DRCL proposal, was one of those, and there was the whole talk about it being one of the lower rated ones. It was lower rated because I believe that it talked about using the alternate site, which is the Bordentown site. When it came to the table for us to consider that, obviously the main consideration, and I've always said this, is one to do with cost, because everyone talks about finding solutions to problems, but you have to be realistic in how you're going to pay for the solutions, especially in the current climate that we live in. We're now under considerable restrictions in terms of borrowing and additional borrowing, and that's going to be for the foreseeable future. So any major capital project that the government has to undertake is going to have to be undertaken with some other innovative way of financing it, or some other public-private partnership or otherwise. So when this proposal was put before us, what I always said was that we would consider it if all of these criteria could be addressed. One is the environmental impact and assessment, which is underway. So I think what my colleague has said was that there was no approval from us, no carte blanche approval on the part of any of us here, himself, myself, or any of us at this table, for that facility to be in Bordentown. What was happening was the consideration of the environmental impact assessment, the technical reviews, and those are ongoing at present. So with those in hand, then a decision could be made, but there was no decision has ever been made up until this point to put that facility there, and certainly not to put a dump there, right? And that's always been the spin that's been put on it. It's been to put a proper waste management facility. And so people have said, we had a position where, we could take an easy political thing and say, look, we're not supporting this because we want to be re-elected. But what I said was, this is a solution that could take our country forward for waste management for the future. It needs to be done. Numerous other studies have shown have said that that site should be closed in Georgetown and that a new site should be identified, including in that general vicinity where that is, including in that general vicinity. I'll note, for instance, in the review of the development plan which took place, which I was a part of as a member of Public Works, where they talked about, and it was a development plan and a review where we were talking about the growth and development of the district of Bordentown. The stakeholder group that worked on that plan at that time in 2001 identified and said that because it talked about a vision for Bordentown, and said in 10 years there will be a recycling and sorting station for waste in the district. So even the community at that point was saying that we needed some sort of facility to address waste management within the district as well. So, but again, go back to the point, no one has ever given any carte blanche approval for a facility to be there. It's been always contingent on these studies, technical reviews, and all that, which are ongoing.
We understand that. We understand that there's been no carte blanche approval given. But what I'm asking, and what we're hearing from Mr. Seymour now, is that this was something he never supported in terms of that facility being there. What I'm asking you, are you in agreement with Mr. Seymour on that, or depending on what the money says?
Well, I was trying to get to that point.
To be succinct about it,
I was trying to get to the point. I have always been in support of identifying a solution for solid waste management for the country. If the solution is to put a facility in Bordentown or East End or North Side or West Bay for that matter, that is done properly, I support that, and that's always been my position. Because, as I said, I'm not thinking of the political perspective that says because a handful of people don't support it that it shouldn't happen. I'm a practical person that says we need to find a solution. That dump is causing more problems now than we ever know about, and will continue to cause more problems. When it's 200 feet tall, then we'll still be talking about finding a solution for it if we don't take one of the ones that we have on the table now. The one that was put forward talked about a developers putting out great capital costs to close one, to put a new one, and then government move on from there. If that is off the table at present, because as I said, we have not signed the agreement. It won't be signed between now and the next election. What I encourage the next government to do is to put that number one on their priority list, is to find a solution for solid waste management for the country.
And Tommy, I just want to add, because I've never been one scared to accept responsibility for anything or any wrongdoing or anything I've done that people weren't happy about. I talked about, and that's why I led it up the way I did. It was about the decision to move to Bordentown, as my colleague said. That was what I was most unhappy about. The actual, not where is the perfect site for a waste management facility in Cayman. That hasn't been determined yet. And definitely, I had my own interest piqued as to where would this go, because I wouldn't have been happy in agreeing that anything go in Bordentown unless we had a lot of things done, including site visits off the island with a numerous amount of Bordentowners from the area and otherwise, to different facilities in the U.S. and anywhere else we needed to go to ensure that our residents were comfortable, and then still trying to be cognizant that we need to be realistic about cost.
Can I just get some clarity on this? As a group, you will be campaigning on these issues on the campaign trail. You will be talking about your solutions for everything from unemployment to education, health, training. The issue of the dump is a question. Are you all saying that you will not be campaigning on the idea, this is all of you, supporting the idea of moving the landfill, where it goes or not? What's your position? Do you support moving the landfill to somewhere, i.e. Bordentown or West Bay, or not?
Well, and first of all, we seem to have to be clarifying this at every question that's asked. Nobody's moving the landfill from where it is. That's the first thing. Nobody's moving the landfill from where it is. I mean, that'd be a huge, monumental, and gigantic task to take 40 years worth of rubbish that's been dumped in one location and move it to another one. So please try and clarify that no one is moving the dump from where it is.
When I sat on the solid waste committee as the opposition member from 2006, I think was my appointment, up to 2009. my first involvement in this was a visit to Sumter County, Florida, and I think somewhere around 2001. What unfortunately has happened is we've had a very important national issue completely politicized with misinformation and fear mongering. If you go to a properly managed waste management facility, I can remember one in Springfield, Massachusetts. Opposite the facility was a Burger King, a strip mall, directly across the street, and a supermarket was even in that, right? When you have a properly managed facility, it is not a dump. The other thing that became very obvious, and I still hear people saying this, and I'm amazed, right? I still hear this notion that we can solve the problem on the current site. Firstly, if you look at land space, if you look at burn ability, because the other thing that everybody loves to just throw out is waste to energy. Now, I have said to my colleagues, and this is my personal view, when you look at the economics, when you look at the cost and the amount of electricity that is going to be able to be generated, I am still not convinced that there is a real economic argument that withstands scrutiny. I am not convinced that you will be able to expend those amounts of money without having to increase fees somewhere, and it's going to have to come back to the taxpayer. And so whilst you could build a $100 million facility that Minister Scotland spoke to, how are you going to pay for it? And so I believe that people need to really educate themselves about what's at the Georgetown dump and what's really viable and not. This whole notion that we're going to be able to dredge Mount Trashmore and burn what's in there, I believe is foolhardy to say the least. Foolhardy to say the least. That has more moral and things that aren't combustible in it. Now, at the end of the day, we do need a solution to our waste. We're a growing population. We live in a world that produces a lot of waste, and we need to come up with ways in which we manage our waste. And we do it in a modern, responsible way that is financially affordable. And that's what my colleagues have been saying. And so come May, when all of the folly is ended, because we know, as the old people in Cayman say, once tongue learn to talk, it will say anything. And that's the garbage that you're getting, no pun intended, from a lot of the candidates that's out there. Right? They'll be talking about garbage, and what they're saying is garbage. The fact of the matter is, in my humble submission, we have to look beyond the current dump, which is in the middle of our capital, which is not only an eyesore, but it's a health hazard. It has a negative impact on residents, tourism, and everything you can dream of. We do need to have a holistic approach that not only has recycling as an element, but we also need to think through an affordable way in which everything that is not recycled is dealt with. There are many other technologies out there, and not just these things that are in the experimental stages. Many other technologies that we can use, and we need to come together very quickly, not have some process that's going to last years of spinning wheels. Look, round it down to a few choices and go forward as a community. But Minister Seymour hit a nail on the head. Government has to bring our residents along. We have to educate everyone so that people can actually see what these facilities look like and understand. Because I would be fearful if someone said to me, oh, well, what we have right now off the Tiblets Highway is going to be moved to anywhere else on in this island.
Exactly.
if what we have in Cayman Brac is going to be moved to anywhere else on the three islands. So we do need, and I think all of us who are going to be candidates put our hands up and be accountable and say that we're committed to not only for a lot of them, they need to educate themselves, I can tell you, but they need to educate the public about this whole process and what these facilities look like, what they really are, and ensure that we're able to move forward. We need a solution for our garbage. It's that simple. It's that simple. But
simple.
can I just say that I want to encourage all to come out this evening at 5:30 at the Sir Vassal Johnson Hall, so that we can enjoy and celebrate the fact that a community this small, 55,000 people, is going to have a Bachelor of Science and Nursing program. That's a big achievement for a community this small. It's going to be a high quality program, and as I said, I really want to thank my colleague, the Minister of Health. They were the ones that really drove a lot of the technical work, because obviously educators can dream and come up with programs, but this is a regulated industry and a very important industry. They had to do the technical work. I think it was Dr. Reed, Nurse Reed, that from PAHO,
from PAHO
that actually did the curriculum, and they sourced her and brought her and on board, and that's really what made the process what it is. And now we have a program that we are confident is going to meet all standards, all scrutiny, and certainly we look forward to next week's briefing. We're sure there's going to be many more topics to discuss. And Wendy, I don't know what may be found in the cupboards.
Make sure we've covered all questions.
Yeah.
Just wanted to say before we wrap up, the beautiful world of communication. Well, I'm up here. Just want to send a message asking if as minister, if I was prepared to adjust the or extend the date in terms of the Siemens ex gratia payments, the grant. And yes, definitely as minister, I'm prepared to after further review with the secretary. In fact, I'll go and deal with that today to ensure that no one is disenfranchised and no one will be suspended at this very moment, and we'll possibly extend the time if necessary once I get the final count, once this interview is finished.
I just want to just because I think when I asked the question just to us all in terms of the position on the landfill, as my colleague mentioned, we were both members of the opposition. I had the privilege of traveling to some of those facilities that he referred to as well. I think that it's important for the country to acknowledge waste management is a science and requires a significantly high level of technical expertise to find a suitable solution. And while we get a scientific solution, then we have to look at the financial realities of that solution. And so some of you may remember that where shortly after accepting or getting sworn into as the new government, we started on a process. And I was given the challenge to head that process up, which was a solicitation process and an RFP for finding a solution for the facility. Now, it's important that we manage the expectations. That process did not ensure that we were going to get an acceptable solution. But what it did do, it allowed us to get interested parties that had the required experience and expertise to come forward to actively address the situation that the Cayman Islands found itself in regards to waste management and enter into dialogue. So the process was to select a company, which public knowledge is that we've selected Wheelabrator through a very rigorous RFP process. There were 6 other companies that put forward bids for a solution. Those solutions did not include costing at that point. The intention was that you would then enter into negotiations to see what solutions in terms of the financial solutions or the financial realities. And based on that outcome, the government would then be required to make a decision as to whether that was a suitable solution or an acceptable solution or not. We didn't reach that point because we then moved in where we had a developer who was willing to make a significant contribution to the solution that was desired. But to be able to say what is the ideal solution for the Cayman Islands is going to require quite a bit of expertise, quite a bit of time, because while, as my colleague said, people can get up and talk garbage, they really aren't qualified to be able to say what can and what is in the best interest of the Cayman Islands. So, for example, if it was a determination that there was some level of contaminant in the landfill that excavating may bring forward or may cause, people would very quickly decide that maybe no, that's not the right solution. But again, I can't sit here and tell you that that's the right solution. What I can say to you is that we have experts around the world and experts who are committed and willing and see the potential opportunities to come and do that. And that's where the process was for the RFP, and that's where we thought we had gotten to. The government then made a decision to move in a different direction. And I can say to you that a driving force to that decision would have been the financial realities that existed at the time. But to say what's going to happen and what is going to be the best solution, like I said, I don't think any of us are qualified to be able to say where is the best place, what's the best solution. But we have a responsibility as leaders to seek that information and to try to make sure that whatever solution is decided upon, it's in the best interest of the Cayman Islands. I don't know if there's any more.
I do have a quick one. If I can just
Sure.
sneak
Anytime you say you're sneaking them in, Brett, we started worrying.
it is for you, Mr. Glidden.
Surprise, surprise, Brett.
Sorry. 22 March. RC Cayman Holdings, according to court records, was notified of an appraisal. A new appraisal was being done on the Ritz-Carlton Hotel property. Can you tell me who's doing that and why? And also, RC Cayman claims in the very same court document that they paid $9.6 million in stamp duty on December 20th, and that the property still hasn't been transferred to them. So
it's not really my responsibility, but I'm familiar with the issue. Just to say that lands isn't one of my areas of responsibility. But if you can, I mean, just quickly to answer, yes, there was a payment made on a estimated valuation, I guess, at that time. The reason why there is that the government has notified that there's going to be separate evaluations is because there has been some question, I think some public question, as to whether the stated value is actually the accurate value, and there is some concern. And in full openness and transparency, before making a decision, the government has decided, and this was led by the Premier, under whose ministry the responsibility for lands lay, would be that because there are some discrepancies in what has been stated publicly before and what has been stated now as the value, that the prudent exercise would be to go out and get comparative evaluations so that the government could be satisfied one way or the other as to what the true value should be. Hopefully that's a clear enough.
you know who's doing the valuation?
I don't know. Those would be companies that were chosen by the Lands and Survey.
It was an RFP process. But it was an RFP process conducted by Land and Survey, so I'm not sure who would have been successful.
I just have a quick follow, because obviously it was the government surveyor that went out and valued the property in the first place, and then the Ritz-Carlton owners at the time just agreed, okay, that's what it's worth. So it's basically like saying, okay, I'll sell you my home for $1 million. We both agree on the price, and you go back, oh, I didn't get enough money out of that. Isn't that the exact example?
Well, Jay, the situation that exists is that we have many instances where the actual property or the price that something is sold for and the actual valuation upon which stamp duty has to be paid for is significantly different. So what we have is we have statements or utterances that were made. I mean, if we look at I'll try not to be too specific because we don't know where this is going to go, but we've had statements made that the property would have been valued somewhere in the region of $400 million. not so long ago, within the last 5 years, I think, 5 to 7 years. All right. And now we get another evaluation, maybe within the same department, but maybe it's not a comparative valuation. Maybe assets have changed hands since that point in time. But if we have a statement being made that it's valued at 400 million, and then we get stamp duty paid on 170 million, I think it's fair that questions would be asked as to whether the government has gotten the requisite amount for the value of property. And so the prudent thing to do, because I can say to you that if someone could come back and say that 5 years ago or 7 years ago, the Ritz-Carlton and its property was valued at 400 million, and my government decided that we were going to collect stamp duties on 170 million 5 or 7 years later, I think it's recognized that property values in the 7 Mile Beach haven't reduced by 70% in 5 years. And so the only prudent thing to do at that stage would be to get a comparative valuation, because we aren't talking about a small amount of money, right? It's not insignificant in terms. So we had to make a decision on what we thought was the right thing to do as representatives of the people. And the right thing was to do, if we have that level of conflict between appraisals, then we need to go and get some additional appraisals so that we can make the decision. And so, well, and that's the point. I mean, at the end of it, I mean, that's the justification, or that's the decision, and they obviously have been notified that the government is going forward with other evaluations. Independent evaluations.
And just lastly, Jade, I mean, you used a beautiful, simplistic example. Unfortunately, that example does not hold up in law, because if I just woke up one morning and said I was going to sell a piece of property for $1, the Lands and Survey Department under law has every right to see what the real market value was and assess stamp duty on the real market value. If we had your example, Jay,
it was a bad example. I'll take that.
So, and I just want to make sure that that's clear, so that people understand that there is a process that
There
has
was
to
a
go.
government valuation done, and the government valuation came up with that figure according to the lawsuit that is in the courts.
Right, and as I think as Minister Glidden has said, given all of the public utterances around this, and given the whole scenario, and going from 400 plus million to 170, the decision was taken that it would be prudent to ensure, without moving forward another step, that we close this chapter as holistically as possible, above question, so that we can put this debate behind us. But thanks for all the questions.